Stop before you spend your old quarters. From the 1965 and 1966 Washington quarters to the 1776-1976 bicentennial drummer, 2001 D Rhode Island, and 2002 D Maryland state quarters. One of these coins could hide an extraordinary mint era, rare variety, or elite MS condition that sends collectors into a bidding war. Documented auction records prove that exceptional examples can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Check every coin, because the smallest detail could change its entire value story. Let's get started with step 1. What if a quarter sitting unnoticed in an old coin jar could turn out to be something collectors actually want to investigate? A 1776-1976 Washington quarter looks familiar to millions of people, but small differences in condition, minting characteristics, eras, and provenance can completely change the story. Today, we're taking a close look at the 1776-1976 Washington bicentennial quarter, the famous quarter featuring the colonial drummer, and we are separating genuine collectible characteristics from exaggerated internet claims about enormous values. Before we talk about prices, there's one important mystery to solve. What exactly does no date or no mint mark mean on a 1776-1976 quarter? The date is part of the bicentennial design itself, 1776-1976. So if someone describes a genuine bicentennial quarter as having no date, the first thing a collector should do is inspect the coin carefully rather than immediately assuming it is a rare era. And that's where our story begins. Imagine finding one in circulated condition. The surface has marks from years of handling. The lettering isn't especially sharp. The fields have lost some of their original brilliance. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than another quarter. But then you turn it over, you check the date, you inspect the mint mark area, you look at the edge, and suddenly the ordinary coin becomes a question. Is it a normal circulation strike? Is it a special composition? Is there an unusual minting characteristic, or is somebody simply describing a normal coin with an inaccurate, rare coin label? That uncertainty is exactly what makes coin collecting so fascinating. The strongest YouTube stories don't simply announce the answer at the beginning. They give viewers pieces of the puzzle and let them follow the investigation. That approach is especially useful for coin videos because every coin can have a different combination of date, mint, condition, composition, and possible error. The 1776-1976 Washington quarter was produced for America's bicentennial celebration. Instead of showing only the familiar Washington portrait and a conventional reverse, the special reverse features a colonial drummer alongside a torch and 13 stars. That design immediately makes the coin recognizable, but recognition doesn't automatically mean rarity. Millions of bicentennial quarters were produced, which means simply owning a 1776-1976 quarter does not establish that it is a valuable rarity. The real investigation begins with the individual coin, and that's the lesson every collector should remember. The date creates the story, but the coin's specific characteristics determine the collecting interest. Now look closely near the date and design details. A bicentennial quarter may have a mint mark, or depending on the particular issue, the absence of one may be significant only when interpreted correctly. This is where inexperienced collectors can make a costly mistake. No mint mark does not automatically mean extremely rare. The absence of a mint mark has to be evaluated in the context of the coin's issue, production method, composition, and known varieties. So if your quarter appears to have no mint mark, don't jump straight to a 5-figure valuation. Instead, ask a better question. What exact issue is this coin? That single question can prevent an enormous amount of confusion. Now imagine two collectors finding identical-looking bicentennial quarters. Collector number 1 finds a heavily circulated example. The surfaces contain scratches and contact marks. The design is still recognizable, but the coin clearly spent years moving through everyday commerce. Collector number 2 finds a sharply preserved example with strong original detail and much less evidence of circulation. They may have the same basic date and design. Yet their collecting appeal can be completely different. This is why condition matters. A coin's value isn't determined simply by how old it is. Sometimes the most important part of the story is how well that coin survived. You may see the letters MS in coin listings. MS means mint state. In simple terms, a mint state coin has not circulated in the normal sense and is graded within the mint state numerical range by professional grading standards. But here's another important distinction. A coin that looks shiny to the naked eye is not automatically a high-grade MS coin. Professional grading considers numerous factors, including surface preservation, strike, luster, contact marks, and overall appearance. So when you see a headline claiming that a particular bicentennial quarter is worth a huge amount because it is MS, don't stop there. The exact grade matters. The grading service matters. The variety or error matters. And most importantly, the documented market history matters. Now we reach the part that gets everyone's attention. How much has one actually sold for? This is where coin videos often go wrong. A dramatic asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed auction sale. Someone can list a quarter online for $10,000, $50,000, or even more. That doesn't mean someone paid that amount. For a serious valuation, collectors should distinguish between an asking price, an unsold listing, an auction estimate, a reported sale, and a verified realized price. Those are not interchangeable. A genuine auction result is much more useful because it demonstrates that a buyer actually paid the reported amount under the conditions of that sale. Suppose you discover a listing claiming that a special 1976 quarter sold only once for an unusually high amount. That sounds exciting, but now comes the detective work. What was the exact coin? What was the grade? Was it certified? Was there a documented error? Was the composition unusual? Was the sale actually completed? Was the reported price for the coin itself, or did the listing combine other information? Those questions matter because one spectacular number can easily be misunderstood. A single extraordinary auction result does not automatically mean every similar-looking quarter has the same value. In fact, it may be the exact opposite. The rare feature might be so specific that only one particular coin qualifies. This is where the 1976 quarter becomes especially interesting. Mint errors can create genuine collector interest. An error occurs when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process. Producing a coin outside the normal intended specifications, but not every unusual-looking mark is an error. A scratch can look dramatic. A damaged rim can look strange. A stain can make lettering appear distorted. Machine damage can sometimes resemble a mint error. That's why experienced collectors don't simply say, "It's different, therefore it's valuable." They investigate. And that investigation is what turns a random coin into a numismatic story. Imagine a second bicentennial quarter. This one has the same general design, but something about the strike looks unusual. The lettering appears different. The rim looks unusual. One section of the design seems stronger than expected. Instead of immediately calling it a rare error, a collector compares the coin with known examples. This is where patience becomes more valuable than excitement. If the characteristic is documented, the coin may deserve further attention. If it isn't documented, caution is necessary. The lesson is simple. A strange appearance is a reason to investigate, not proof of a fortune. Now let's compare two hypothetical examples. The first quarter is heavily circulated. The second is exceptionally preserved. Even if both are authentic 1976 Washington quarters, the second may attract considerably more attention from collectors looking for high-grade examples. This is why the phrase, "good condition," should be used carefully. In everyday language, good sounds positive. In professional coin grading, however, specific grades have specific meanings. A seller calling a coin good condition doesn't establish its official grade. That distinction becomes extremely important when someone claims a coin is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. There's another mystery we need to clear up. The bicentennial quarter carries the dual date 1776, 1976, because it commemorates America's 200th anniversary. So when someone says 1776 quarter, they may actually be referring to the bicentennial issue rather than a quarter struck in 1776. That's a huge difference. The United States did not have the modern Washington quarter in 1776. The 1776, 1976 inscription is commemorative. Understanding that historical detail immediately makes the coin easier to identify. If so many were made, why do collectors continue examining them? Because collecting isn't only about rarity. Collectors can pursue different mint issues, different compositions, proof examples, high-grade coins, varieties, documented errors, and historically interesting pieces. The bicentennial quarter also represents an important moment in American history. It was part of a nationwide celebration. Millions of Americans encountered these coins in everyday life. And that means the coin isn't merely metal. It is a small historical object connected to a major national anniversary. Here's something fascinating. Imagine someone opening an old jar of coins. They find ordinary quarters, nickels, pennies, and then a bicentennial drummer quarter. They remember seeing that design many times, so they almost throw it back into the jar. But this time they stop. They examine the date. They inspect the mint mark area. They check the condition. They look for unusual characteristics. That 5-minute inspection is exactly how a collector's mindset begins. The point isn't to assume every coin is valuable. The point is to learn why one coin can be different from another. If you genuinely have a bicentennial quarter where the date seems missing, don't immediately assume it is a famous rarity. First, clean lighting can reveal details that aren't obvious under poor conditions. Second, wear or damage can affect how clearly the date appears. Third, the coin may not actually be the type you think it is. And fourth, genuine mint errors need authentication before extraordinary value claims should be taken seriously. This is one of those situations where a clear photograph of both sides, the edge, and the relevant mint mark area can be far more useful than a dramatic price claim. Now let's bring the story into 2026. The modern coin market is still heavily influenced by condition, certification, rarity, documented varieties, and collector demand. But there isn't one universal 2026 value for every 1776 1976 quarter. A circulated example can have a very different market position from a certified high-grade specimen. A normal coin can be worth very differently from a confirmed mint era, and a coin with an unusual composition can have a completely different collecting story from an ordinary circulation issue. So the responsible answer isn't, every bicentennial quarter is worth thousands. The responsible answer is, identify the exact coin first, then determine the grade, variety, error status, composition, and comparable sales. One of the biggest mistakes is starting with the price. Collectors should start with identification. Think of it like solving a mystery. First, what coin is it? Then where was it made? Then what composition does it have? Then what condition is it in? Then, is there a recognized variety or error? And only after those questions should you ask, what is it worth? That sequence protects you from both underestimating an unusual coin and overestimating an ordinary one. You may see headlines saying, rare quarter worth $10,000, or this 1776 1976 coin sold for a fortune. Those headlines are designed to create curiosity, and curiosity is powerful, but a good collector looks beyond the headline. What coin was actually sold? What grade did it receive? What error was present? Was the price verified? Was it an auction realization or simply an asking price? Without those answers, the number doesn't tell you much. Here's the most interesting part of the entire story. The value of a coin often comes from something incredibly small, a tiny difference in production, a particular composition, an unusual strike, a scarce variety, an exceptionally preserved surface, or a documented error. Two coins can look almost identical to someone who isn't familiar with numismatics. Yet an experienced collector may immediately recognize that they belong to different categories. That's why studying coins can be so rewarding. You aren't just looking for old money, you're learning to see details other people overlook. Turn the coin over again. There is Washington. The portrait is familiar, but remember that this is a special bicentennial issue, and the reverse is what immediately separates it from an ordinary Washington quarter. The drummer design gives the coin its identity, and that design has become one of the most recognizable modern American commemorative coin designs. But again, recognition is not the same thing as rarity. The real story begins when the individual coin differs from the ordinary examples. If you find an interesting specimen, write down everything you can determine. Record the date, record the mint mark or apparent lack of one, record the condition. Record whether it appears circulated or uncirculated, record unusual features, take clear photographs, and don't alter the coin. Cleaning a coin can damage its collectible surfaces and make professional evaluation more difficult. If the coin appears genuinely unusual, professional authentication may be worthwhile. This is perhaps the most important lesson. Hope says, this coin looks unusual, so it must be worth a fortune. Evidence says, this coin has a documented characteristic, has been authenticated, and comparable examples have established market results. Those are two completely different approaches. Coin collecting becomes much more interesting when you move from hope to evidence. And that's exactly how you should approach any 1976 Washington quarter. Imagine a third quarter. It has been circulated for decades. Its surfaces are worn. There is nothing immediately spectacular about it, but perhaps it came from a family collection that has been passed down for generations. Its monetary value might not be extraordinary. Its historical story, however, could be priceless to that family. That's an important reminder that numismatic value isn't always the same as emotional value. Coins can carry memories. They can connect generations. They can tell stories about the people who handled them. And sometimes, that's why a collector keeps a coin, even when another buyer might offer only a modest amount. So, is your bicentennial quarter valuable? The answer depends on the exact coin. A normal circulated 1976 quarter should not automatically be treated as a rare jackpot. A high-grade example, special issue, unusual composition, recognized variety, or authenticated mint error may deserve much more attention. And if you encounter a spectacular claimed auction value, verify the exact coin and sale before believing the number. That's the difference between collecting responsibly and chasing internet rumors. So let's return to the coin we imagined at the beginning, a 1976 drummer quarter. Perhaps it is circulated. Perhaps the mint mark appears absent. Perhaps someone has described it as having no date. Perhaps a dramatic online listing claims an enormous value. The first instinct might be excitement. The better instinct is curiosity. Look closer. Identify it. Study it, compare it, verify it. Then and only then, talk about value, because the most valuable thing about a coin story isn't always the final price. Sometimes it's the discovery that makes you look at an ordinary quarter differently forever. And that is why the 1976 Washington bicentennial quarter continues to attract attention from collectors. One coin can be common. Another can be unusually preserved. Another can contain a recognized variety. Another can have a documented error. And another can simply carry a story that makes it worth keeping. So before you spend that old drummer quarter, check it carefully. Because you may not be holding a fortune, but you might be holding a coin with a story worth investigating. And in numismatics, the smallest detail can sometimes make the biggest difference. If you enjoyed this investigation, stay curious, because the next coin in your collection may have a completely different story. Step 2. What if the 1965 Washington quarter in your pocket looks like an ordinary 25-cent coin, but the highest recorded auction result for this date is thousands of dollars? That sounds impossible at first. After all, the 1965 quarter was made for circulation, and the date isn't considered a classic rarity by itself. But there is a catch. The spectacular prices belong to exceptional examples, especially coins with extraordinary preservation or recognized varieties. not every circulated 1965 quarter. So today we're opening the case on the 1965 Washington quarter, looking at its history, the missing mint mark, circulation condition, genuine errors, MS grades, and documented auction results available as we enter the 2026 numismatic market. And by the end, you'll know exactly why one 1965 quarter can be worth face value, while another example has brought a remarkable auction price. The first coin, the ordinary 1965 quarter. Picture the first coin sitting on a table. It has Washington on the obverse. The reverse carries the American eagle design used on Washington quarters of the period. The date reads 1965. The coin is worn from circulation. There are scratches and contact marks. At first glance, there's nothing mysterious about it. And that is actually an important part of the story. The 1965 quarter was produced in enormous numbers. PCGS lists a mintage of 1,819,717,540 pieces. It was struck at Philadelphia and has a copper-nickel outer layer over a copper center. So if you find a normal circulated 1965 quarter with ordinary wear, don't assume that the date alone makes it a rare coin. The real investigation begins when we ask, what makes one 1965 quarter different from another? The second coin, why there is no mint mark. Now turn your 1965 quarter over, or rather, look carefully around Washington's neck on the obverse. You may notice something immediately. There is no mint mark. That can sound exciting. But here's the twist. A 1965 quarter without a mint mark is not automatically an error. The regular 1965 quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and Philadelphia did not use a mint mark on these quarters. So if your 1965 Washington quarter has no mint mark, that characteristic by itself is normal. This is one of the most important clues in today's investigation. A missing mint mark is only valuable as an error when the coin was supposed to have one. For this regular 1965 issue, the absence of a mint mark is part of the normal identification. So don't let a headline convince you otherwise. No mint mark does not automatically equal rare. The third coin, the CIRCULATD example. Now imagine another 1965 quarter. This one has clearly spent years in someone's pocket. The high points of Washington's portrait show wear. The eagle on the reverse isn't as sharp as it once was. The rims have picked up contact marks, and the surfaces have lost the original appearance of a freshly struck coin. This is a circulated example. For a normal 1965 quarter, circulation condition usually isn't where the spectacular values are found. The coin's enormous original production means ordinary worn examples are not automatically scarce. But there's something fascinating about circulated coins. They tell us how the coin was actually used. A quarter minted in 1965 could have passed through stores, vending machines, banks, restaurants, and thousands of people's hands. That means your particular coin may have its own journey, even if its market value remains modest. And sometimes the next coin tells a completely different story. The fourth coin, when condition changes everything. Now place another 1965 quarter beside the worn one. At first, the date is exactly the same. The design is the same. The metal is the same. But this coin has hardly any signs of circulation. The surfaces are much cleaner. The original luster is still visible. The details are sharper. And suddenly, we're no longer talking about an ordinary circulated quarter. We are talking about a potential mint state example. This is where the 1965 quarter becomes much more interesting. PCGS records 599 auction lots for its 1965 MS category and lists an auction record of $12,650. But don't make the mistake of saying, every 1965 quarter is worth $12,650. That's not what the auction record means. It represents an exceptional individual coin. And that's the difference between a date value and a specific coin's market value. The fifth coin, the $705 MS-67 story. Now let's make the mystery more specific. One documented 1965 Washington quarter was graded MS-67 and sold through Heritage Auctions in January 2015 for $705. That is a dramatic jump from face value. But why? Not because it was a 1965 quarter alone. The grade was the key. The coin had survived decades without accumulating the amount of damage normally seen on a circulation piece. And that's the strange thing about modern coins. A coin can be extremely common overall while becoming much scarcer at the highest grades. Millions were made. Millions entered circulation. But finding an example that survived in exceptional condition is a completely different challenge. That's where collectors start paying attention. The sixth coin, the MS-65 reality check. Now let's bring the grade down. Imagine a certified 1965 quarter graded MS-65. That's still a very nice coin. But it isn't the same as an extraordinary MS-67 or a top population specimen. PCGS records an MS-65 example selling for $21 in a January 2006 David Lawrence RC auction. And that comparison teaches us something incredibly important. Two coins can both be called mint state, yet their auction histories can be dramatically different. So when someone tells you, it's MS, therefore it's worth thousands, that statement is missing the most important part. Which MS grade? MS-60, MS-65, MS-67, MS-68. And how rare is that grade among surviving examples? The number after MS can completely change the story. The seventh coin, the $12,650 auction record. Now we arrive at the biggest documented number in this investigation. PCGS records an auction result of $12,650 for a 1965 Washington quarter described as Gem BU, sold by Stax in January 2005. That's an extraordinary result. But notice something very important. This is an auction record for an exceptional example, not a universal price for the 1965 date. PCGS's current CoinFacts information also identifies the coin as a Philadelphia issue with a mintage of 1,819,717,540 and a copper-nickel over copper composition. So how can a coin with nearly 1.82 billion pieces struck produce a five-figure auction result? Because rarity can exist within a grade. The coin doesn't need to be rare in every condition. It can be common in circulated condition and scarce at the very top of the grading scale. That's the real lesson behind this auction record. The eighth coin, the error investigation. Now suppose your 1965 quarter looks different. Maybe the lettering seems doubled. Maybe part of the design appears unusual. Maybe Washington's portrait has an apparent doubling effect. Now we have a completely different investigation. PCGS identifies recognized 1965 varieties, including DDO FS101, DDO FS102, and DDR-FS 801. That matters because a documented die variety is different from random damage. A coin can become interesting because of a recognized variety. But here's the rule every collector should remember. Don't call every unusual-looking coin an error. A scratch isn't necessarily a mint error. A dent isn't necessarily a mint error. Machine damage isn't necessarily a doubled die. And wear can make ordinary details appear strange. The characteristic needs to be compared with known examples before making a serious value claim. The no-date claim. Now let's address another phrase that often appears in coin searches. 1965 quarter with no date. A genuine 1965 Washington quarter should have its date on the obverse. If the date appears missing, the first explanation shouldn't automatically be rare error. It could be heavy wear. It could be damage. It could be an imaging problem. Or the coin may simply not be what the seller claims. A genuine mint error requires evidence. So if you find a quarter where the date appears absent, treat it as an identification mystery first, not a guaranteed jackpot. The 2026 value question. So what is a 1965 Washington quarter worth in 2026? There isn't one single answer. A normal circulated example is a completely different market item from an exceptional certified mint state coin. A recognized variety is another category. And an authenticated major mint error would be another story again. The documented PCGS auction records give us a useful range of real-world examples. One MS-65 example sold for $21. One MS-67 example sold for $705. And the recorded auction record reaches $12,650 for an exceptional 1965 example. That spread is exactly why collectors should never value a coin simply by searching the date. You need to identify the individual coin. Why the 1965 date is historic. There is also a fascinating historical reason the 1965 quarter deserves attention. The 1960s brought major changes to America's coinage. The traditional silver composition was being phased out of circulating quarters. The 1965 Washington quarter represents the beginning of the modern clad era. Instead of the old silver composition, this quarter used a copper-nickel outer layer bonded to a copper center. PCGS lists its composition as 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. So this isn't just another date in the Washington quarter series. It's part of a major transition in American monetary history. And that's one reason collectors continue to study it. What makes a 1965 quarter valuable? Think about the coin as a puzzle. First comes the date, then the mint, then the composition, then the condition, then the variety, then the error question, and finally the market evidence. The mistake is starting at the end. People see a huge auction number and work backward until they find a reason their coin might match it. Collectors do the opposite. They identify the coin first. Then they determine what makes it unusual. Then they compare it with documented sales. That's how you get from excitement to evidence. The coin that looks ordinary. Imagine one last 1965 quarter. It's sitting in an old collection. It's worn. There is no mint mark. The date is visible. Nothing dramatic appears on either side. Someone might look at it and say, "That's just 25 cents." And for a normal circulated example, that may be the correct conclusion. But put a second coin beside it. This one is sharply preserved. Almost no circulation marks. Strong luster. Excellent strike. Then put a third beside those. This one has a documented double die characteristic. Now suddenly 3 coins with the same year have 3 different stories. That's the magic of numismatics. The date gets you into the investigation. The details determine where the investigation ends. So is your 1965 Washington quarter valuable? Maybe, but don't start with the biggest number you can find. If it is a normal circulated example with no mint mark, the absence of the mint mark is normal for the Philadelphia issue. If it is a high-grade mint state specimen, the story changes. If it reaches an exceptional grade, the market can become dramatically stronger. If it has a recognized double die variety, that creates another reason for collectors to investigate it. And if someone claims it is a major mint error, authentication and careful comparison become essential. The documented auction history proves that exceptional 1965 quarters can bring serious prices. $21 for one MS-65 example, $705 for an MS-67 example, and $12,650 for the recorded auction record. But those numbers belong to specific coins. Not every 1965 quarter. Not every circulated example. Not every no mint mark coin. And certainly not every coin described online as rare. So the next time you see a 1965 Washington quarter, don't throw it back into the change jar without looking. Check the date. Check the surfaces. Check the strike. Look for recognized varieties. And most importantly, compare the coin with documented market evidence. Because the most interesting 1965 quarter isn't necessarily the one that looks the oldest. It may be the one that survived the last 60 years in almost perfect condition. And that's the twist in this story. A coin struck for ordinary circulation can become extraordinary because of how well it survived. That is why the 1965 Washington quarter remains an important piece of modern U.S. numismatic history, and why, in 2026, the right example can still make collectors stop and look twice. One date. One quarter. Billions originally struck. But at the highest levels of preservation, the story becomes completely different. And somewhere out there, another 1965 quarter may still be waiting to be discovered. Step 3. At first, the 1966 quarter doesn't look like a coin that should create much excitement. It's a Washington quarter. It has the familiar eagle reverse. It has no mint mark. And millions upon millions were produced. But that's exactly where today's mystery begins. Because in coin collecting, common does not always mean worthless, and the biggest surprises often come from condition, varieties, errors, and exceptional surviving examples. So today we're going inside the 1966 Washington quarter market, looking at circulated examples, the famous no mint mark question, possible errors, mint state coins, auction history, and what collectors should realistically understand about the 2026 market. And we're going to treat every coin as a different story. Imagine finding a 1966 quarter in a box of old change. The surface is worn. The eagle isn't especially sharp. Washington's portrait has the marks you would expect from years of circulation. You turn it over, look around the obverse, and notice something missing. There is no mint mark. That might immediately sound like a rare error. But wait, this is where the story takes a completely different direction. The absence of a mint mark on the regular 1966 Washington quarter is normal, not automatically evidence of an error. The coin was struck at Philadelphia, which did not place a mint mark on these quarters. So if your 1966 quarter has no mint mark, don't immediately celebrate. The missing letter isn't necessarily the mystery. The real mystery is whether your particular coin has something else that separates it from millions of ordinary examples. And that's where we start looking closer. Now put another 1966 quarter on the table. This one has clearly lived a busy life. Maybe it spent years in vending machines. Maybe it crossed through dozens of cash registers. Maybe it sat inside someone's pocket for months. Its surfaces are no longer fresh. There are contact marks. The high points show wear. And the original brilliance has disappeared. This is what a normal circulated coin looks like. For a common issue like the 1966 Washington quarter, ordinary circulation generally does not create a huge premium. But that doesn't make the coin uninteresting. The 1966 issue belongs to an important period in American coinage. The United States was moving away from traditional silver circulating quarters, and the new copper-nickel-clad era had already begun. That means this little quarter is part of a major transition in American monetary history. And the next coin tells a completely different story. To understand the value story, we have to travel back to the 1960s. Silver prices had risen dramatically. The United States Mint was facing increasing pressure on the supply and cost of silver used in circulating coins. The solution was a new clad composition. The 1966 Washington quarter was part of that transition. Instead of being a traditional 90% silver quarter, it used a copper-nickel outer layer bonded to a copper core. That change created the modern quarter we recognize today. So when you hold a 1966 Washington quarter, you're holding a small piece of the transition between two eras of American coinage. And that historical importance is one reason collectors continue to study the date. But history alone doesn't make every example rare. The individual coin still has to tell us why it deserves attention. Now imagine a completely different 1966 quarter. This one never experienced the rough life of circulation. The fields are bright. The details are sharp. The surfaces have very few distracting marks. The coin almost looks as though it has been waiting for 60 years to be discovered. Now we're entering the world of mint state collecting. This is where the 1966 quarter becomes much more interesting. A coin that was common when it was made can become scarce at extraordinary grades because so few pieces survive in exceptional condition. That creates an unusual situation. You can have millions of examples in circulated condition, while collectors compete for a tiny number of superb specimens. And that's why you should never judge a modern coin only by its original mintage. Sometimes the real rarity is condition. Now let's talk about the number everybody wants to hear. What's the highest value? A spectacular auction result can make headlines, but there is an important rule. The auction price belongs to a specific coin, not automatically to every coin carrying the same date. For a 1966 quarter, the exact grade, certification, appearance, variety, and market circumstances matter. A circulated coin and an exceptionally graded mint state coin are not comparable simply because both say 1966. This is why professional auction records are more useful than random online asking prices. An internet seller can list a quarter for $5,000. That doesn't mean anyone will pay $5,000. A completed auction is different. It demonstrates that a buyer actually purchased the specific coin at that amount. So when you're researching a 1966 quarter, always ask, was that number actually realized? Now let's return to the detail that catches the eye first. No mint mark. For many coin dates, the absence of a mint mark can be important. But 1966 is different. A normal Philadelphia 1966 Washington quarter doesn't need a mint mark. So if you find one with no letter below Washington's neck, that isn't enough to establish rarity. This is an important warning because no mint mark is one of the easiest phrases to turn into an exaggerated coin claim. The better question is, does the coin show a characteristic that should not normally be present? If yes, investigate it. If not, the missing mint mark is simply part of the normal design history. Now imagine another 1966 quarter. This one has something strange happening around the lettering. Perhaps there's apparent doubling. Maybe a section of the design looks unusually strong. Maybe the strike isn't centered correctly. Suddenly, we're no longer looking at the ordinary coin. We're investigating a possible error or variety. But there's a very important distinction. A damaged coin is not automatically an error. A scratch isn't automatically an error. A dent isn't automatically an error. And unusual looking wear doesn't automatically mean the mint made a mistake. A genuine error or recognized variety should be compared against known examples and, when appropriate, professionally authenticated. That's how a collector separates an interesting coin from a misleading online claim. One of the most exciting possibilities for collectors is genuine hub or die doubling. But this is also one of the areas where people make mistakes. Machine doubling can sometimes create a flat, shelf-like appearance. True double die characteristics can have a different appearance and location. So if your 1966 quarter seems to show doubled lettering, don't immediately announce that you've discovered a fortune. Take clear photographs. Compare the exact location of the doubling. Study established references. And if the evidence looks convincing, consider professional evaluation. The difference between looks doubled and recognized doubled die can be enormous. Now turn the quarter sideways. The edge can sometimes reveal information that isn't obvious from the front or back. A normal clad quarter should show its expected layered construction. An unusual edge can raise questions about composition, striking, or damage. But once again, don't jump to the biggest possible conclusion. A damaged edge can look strange. Environmental exposure can change the appearance. And post-mint damage can happen long after the coin leaves the mint. The edge is a clue. It isn't automatically a verdict. Here's another phrase you'll see everywhere. MS condition. MS stands for mint state. But mint state isn't one single grade. There is a large range within the MS scale. An MS coin with noticeable marks can have a completely different market position from an exceptionally preserved MS coin. That's why a seller's saying, 1966 quarter MS rare, doesn't tell you enough. You want the exact grade. You want to know whether it has been professionally certified. And you want to know how many comparable coins exist at that grade. That is where the real numismatic investigation begins. Here's the strange mathematics of coin collecting. Imagine that millions of 1966 quarters were produced. That sounds like there should be no possibility of rarity. But now imagine that almost all of them circulated. Most developed scratches. Most picked up contact marks. Many lost their original luster. Only a tiny percentage remained exceptionally preserved. Suddenly, the population of top-quality examples becomes much smaller. This is called condition rarity. And it's one of the most important ideas to understand when researching modern coins. The date can be common. The highest grade can be scarce. And the scarce grade is where collectors may compete strongly. Now bring the story forward to 2026. The 1966 Washington quarter is now approximately 60 years old. That sounds impressive. But age alone doesn't make the coin rare. Collectors are still interested in the same fundamentals: condition, variety, era status, certification, scarcity, and demand. The market can change over time. Auction prices can rise or fall. A coin that attracts strong competition in one auction may perform differently in another. That's why an old auction result should be treated as evidence of historical market performance, not as a guaranteed 2026 selling price. If you're trying to value your own coin today, the strongest comparison is with recent sales of the same issue and similar grade. This distinction can save you from a lot of confusion. A coin can be described online as worth $10,000. But where did that number come from? Was it a price guide? An asking price? An auction estimate? A dealer's opinion? Or an actual completed sale? Those aren't the same thing. For a YouTube coin story, the most compelling number is often the one backed by an actual documented auction. And even then, you have to identify the exact coin. Because one exceptional MS example doesn't automatically set the value for every circulated 1966 quarter in America. Let's imagine 5 1966 quarters lined up together. The first is heavily circulated. The second is lightly circulated. The third is unusually well preserved. The fourth has a possible variety. The fifth has a feature that may require professional authentication. All 5 carry the same year. Yet they are not really the same collecting proposition. One tells a story about everyday commerce. Another represents better preservation. Another represents condition rarity. Another raises a variety question. And the last might become an error investigation. That's why experienced collectors don't stop at the date. They study the individual coin. Absolutely not if you're investigating it as a collectible. Don't polish it. Don't scrub it. Don't use abrasive materials. And don't try to make an old quarter look new. Original surfaces are part of a coin's condition. Cleaning can leave marks that collectors recognize immediately. So if you believe you've found an unusual 1966 quarter, preserve it exactly as it is. Take photographs. Record what you see. Then compare it with reliable references. The biggest 1966 quarter mistake. The biggest mistake is starting with the price. Someone searches 1966 quarter rare value. They see a huge number. Then they look at their own coin and try to find a reason it must be the same. That's backwards. Start with identification. Then determine condition. Then examine the mint characteristics. Then investigate varieties and errors. Then look at comparable auction sales. And only at the end should you estimate value. That method might not produce the most exciting answer every time, but it produces a much more reliable one. Now imagine the final coin sitting under a bright light. It's dated 1966. There is no mint mark. The coin is circulated. Nothing immediately unusual appears. Would you call it a rare fortune? No. You would call it an ordinary 1966 Philadelphia quarter until evidence showed otherwise. But now imagine another example. Same date. No mint mark. almost untouched surfaces, exceptional strike, professional certification, a very high grade. Suddenly, the conversation changes. And if a recognized variety or genuine mint error appears, the story changes again. That is the lesson. The date identifies the coin. The details create the value story. So, how valuable is a 1966 Washington quarter? For a normal circulated example, don't assume that the lack of a mint mark makes it rare. That absence is normal for the Philadelphia issue. For an exceptionally preserved mint state example, the situation can be very different. For a recognized variety, the coin deserves closer examination. For a genuine mint error, professional authentication may become extremely important. And for any extraordinary value claim, the best evidence is a documented sale of a truly comparable coin. The 1966 quarter may look ordinary, but its history connects it to one of the biggest transformations in American circulating coinage. Its copper-nickel-clad composition represents the new era. Its lack of a mint mark reflects its Philadelphia origin. Its circulated examples tell the story of everyday American commerce. And its finest survivors show how a common coin can become much more interesting when exceptional condition enters the picture. So the next time a 1966 quarter appears in your change, don't just look at the date. Look at the surfaces. Look at the strike. Look for unusual characteristics. Check the edge. And remember the most important rule of all. Never confuse a dramatic asking price with a verified auction result. Because the real treasure isn't simply finding an old quarter. It's discovering why that particular quarter is different. And in the world of numismatics, one tiny detail can turn an ordinary piece of change into a coin worth investigating. 1966. 1 year. 1 design. Millions of stories. But only the exceptional coins get remembered by the market. Step 4. 2002 D Maryland State Quarter value in 2026. The old line state coin, errors, MS grades and auction history. Could a quarter marked 2002 D be worth far more than 25 cents, or is the real treasure hiding somewhere you haven't looked yet? Take a Maryland state quarter out of an old collection, and the first thing you might notice is the D mint mark. Then there's the inscription 1788, the year Maryland entered the Union, and the famous, the old line state designation. It looks ordinary. But here's where this coin gets interesting. The 2002 D Maryland quarter belongs to America's hugely popular 50 state quarters program, and today, in 2026, collectors are looking much more closely at condition, high mint state grades, varieties, and genuine mint errors. And there is one important warning before we talk about big numbers. A 2002 D Maryland quarter is not automatically a rare coin just because it has a D mint mark. The value depends on the individual specimen. So let's examine several different coins, because every Maryland quarter can tell a completely different story. Imagine finding a 2002 D Maryland quarter in your everyday change. The coin has scratches across the fields. The rim has picked up small marks. The Maryland design is still recognizable, but the surfaces clearly show circulation. This is the kind of quarter most people would spend without a second thought. And that's exactly why identification matters. The Maryland State Quarter was released as part of the 50 State Quarters program, which ran from 1999 through 2008. Maryland was represented by a design featuring the Maryland State House, with the inscriptions Maryland, 1788, and the Old Line State. The 2002 D version was struck at Denver. So if your coin is circulated and ordinary, Don't assume that the date alone makes it a high-dollar rarity. The interesting part comes when we start changing one characteristic at a time. Now look carefully at the obverse. You find a small D. That's the Denver Mint mark. And this is where some online coin descriptions become confusing. A D mint mark does not automatically mean the coin is rare. It tells you where the coin was struck. That's useful information, but mint location is only one part of the identification. For the 2002 Maryland quarter, PCGS identifies separate Philadelphia and Denver issues, including 2002 P Maryland and 2002 D Maryland. So when you're checking your quarter, don't stop after finding the D. Ask the next question. How well did this particular coin survive? Because the market can become very different when we move from circulation condition into mint state. Now imagine finding another 2002 D Maryland quarter. This one looks completely different. The surfaces are bright. The lettering is crisp. The State House details are strong. There are very few visible contact marks. Instead of being a worn circulation coin, it may qualify for a mint state grade. And this is where the Maryland quarter becomes much more interesting. PCGS's current price guide shows that certified Maryland state quarters can have substantially different values depending on grade. For example, the guide lists the 2000 D Maryland issue across grades from MS60 through MS68, illustrating how strongly condition can affect modern state quarter values. That same principle applies to the 2002 D series. The important point is simple. MS doesn't mean one price. MS60 and MS68 are very different levels of preservation. And when a coin reaches an unusually high grade, the number of comparable survivors can become much smaller. Now here's something that many collectors don't realize. A complete state quarter set can itself have an auction history. PCGS records an auction result of $24.99 for a 2002 D state quarters MS set, with only one lot recorded in that particular category. That doesn't mean an individual 2002 D Maryland quarter is worth $24.99. It was a set, not one Maryland coin. And that distinction is extremely important. This is why serious coin research requires you to identify exactly what was sold. A set is different from an individual coin. A certified coin is different from an uncertified coin. A high-grade specimen is different from a circulated example. And an asking price is different from a completed auction. Those details can completely change the meaning of a number. Now imagine a Maryland quarter that looks almost perfect. It has no obvious circulation wear. The fields are clean. The State House is sharply defined. The coin has attractive luster. But here's the problem. It may look amazing to your eyes and still receive a lower professional grade than you expected. Why? Because professional grading examines the entire coin. Small contact marks matter. Strike quality matters. Surface preservation matters. And at the highest grades, tiny differences can separate one coin from another. That's why the phrase MS condition should never be used as though it represents a single value. The exact numerical grade is critical. Now the story changes again. You find something strange on your 2002 D Maryland quarter. Perhaps the lettering appears doubled. Maybe the State House looks unusual. Perhaps part of the design seems missing. Or maybe the coin has an unusual strike. Now you've got a reason to investigate. But don't immediately call it a rare error. A genuine mint error is different from damage that happened after the coin left the mint. A scratch can create a strange line. A hit can distort the rim. Normal wear can make details appear unusual. And machine-related effects can sometimes be mistaken for true double dies. So the correct approach is: observe first, identify second, value third. Never reverse that order. Now imagine someone hands you a Maryland quarter and says, "It's a rare 2002 quarter because there's no mint mark." That claim deserves a closer look. If you're specifically looking at the 2002 D Maryland quarter, the D is supposed to identify Denver. If the D appears absent, you need to determine whether you're actually looking at a Denver issue or a Philadelphia issue. A missing-looking mint mark can also result from wear, damage, lighting, or a poor photograph. So don't automatically turn a missing letter into a valuable mint error. The coin must first be correctly identified. And this is a perfect example of why every coin needs its own story. Now turn your attention to the reverse. There it is, 1788. That isn't the date the coin was struck. It's the year Maryland became the 7th state to ratify the U.S. Constitution. That tiny 4-digit number connects a modern quarter to an important moment in American history. And underneath the design, you find the phrase, "The Old Lines State." Maryland's nickname has a long historical connection, particularly with the Maryland Line of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. So this quarter is doing something fascinating. It's using a modern circulating coin to tell a much older story. The coin was made in 2002, but the history represented on it reaches all the way back to 1788 and the Revolutionary era. The 50-state quarters program was designed to put a different state's history and symbols into American pockets. 5 states were represented each year. Maryland's design became part of that nationwide collecting phenomenon. The program was enormously popular and helped introduce a new generation to coin collecting. That's important because demand isn't based only on metal value. Collectors also care about design, history, condition, varieties, and unusual examples. So the Maryland quarter has both historical appeal and modern collecting appeal. Let's put 2 Maryland quarters side by side. The first has been used for years. The second has almost no signs of circulation. Same date, same state, same denomination, but completely different condition. The circulated coin tells a story about everyday American commerce. The mint state coin tells a story about preservation. And if the second coin reaches an exceptionally high certified grade, it can become much more interesting to specialists. This is why common coin and valuable coin aren't always opposites. A common coin can become scarce at a particular grade. This is where we need to be careful. The 2026 market doesn't give every 2002 D Maryland quarter one universal price. A circulated example can be worth very little above face value. A high-grade certified specimen can command a premium. A recognized variety can create additional interest. And a genuine mint error can belong to a completely different market category. PCGS's current state quarter price guide shows that top grades can sometimes carry much larger premiums across the series, with some individual state quarter issues reaching hundreds or even thousands in the highest grades. But that does not mean every Maryland quarter reaches those prices. The exact coin matters. Here's one of the most important lessons for anyone watching coin value videos. You might see a headline saying, "Maryland quarter sold 4 THOUSANDS." Before believing it, ask, which Maryland quarter? Which year? Which mint? What grade? Was it an error? Was it certified? Was it a complete set? And was the price actually realized at auction? PCGS explains that its auction database records significant auction sales from 1997 through 2026, and that the prices shown include the final bid plus buyer's premium when applicable. It also warns users to confirm the actual sales catalog before making buying or selling decisions. That is the kind of evidence we want, not just a dramatic listing. You may also hear, "This coin sold only once." That sounds incredibly rare. But one recorded sale doesn't automatically establish a huge value. It could mean the exact certified combination has appeared only once in that particular database. It could mean there aren't many auction records. Or it could simply mean the available auction history is limited. A single sale is evidence of a transaction. It is not automatically a guarantee of future value. That's why collectors compare multiple sources and, whenever possible, recent sales of truly comparable coins. If your 2002 quarter looks unusual, don't polish it. Don't scrub it. Don't use chemicals to make it shine. And don't try to restore the surfaces yourself. A coin's original surface condition is part of its collectible appeal. Cleaning can leave marks that experienced collectors immediately notice. If you think you have something special, preserve it as found and document it carefully. Now place one last coin under the light. The date says 2002. The reverse says Maryland. The design carries 1788. The phrase "the old line state" appears below. And on the obverse, the small d tells you that this is the Denver issue. At first, it looks like a normal state quarter. Maybe it is. But perhaps the surfaces are unusually strong. Perhaps the coin has an interesting variety. Perhaps there is a genuine mint error. Or perhaps it's simply a nice circulated example with historical importance. The point is that you cannot determine the answer from the date alone. So is the 2002 Maryland Old Line State quarter valuable? For a normal circulated coin, don't assume that the D mint mark makes it rare. For an ordinary example, the value may remain close to its face value range. But a high-grade certified coin is a different story. A particularly scarce grade can attract collectors. A documented variety can add another layer. And a genuine mint error can create a separate collecting category. The current PCGS guide demonstrates that condition has a major effect across state quarter issues, while its auction database shows that completed sales, not simply advertised prices, are the numbers worth studying. And that's the real secret behind the Maryland quarter. The D doesn't make it rare. The 1788 doesn't make it rare. The fact that it's from 2002 doesn't make it rare. What matters is what makes your particular coin different. Maybe it's the grade. Maybe it's the preservation. Maybe it's a recognized variety. Maybe it's a genuine error. Or maybe its greatest value is historical, the little state quarter that carried Maryland's story into millions of American hands. So before you spend your 2002 Maryland quarter, take another look. Check the mint mark. Study the surfaces. Inspect the design. Look for genuine varieties. And never confuse an internet asking price with a verified auction result. Because one Maryland quarter can be ordinary, while another, separated by only a few tiny details, can become a much more interesting numismatic discovery. 2002 Maryland. The Old Line State. 1 quarter, but a completely different story depending on the coin you hold. Step 50, 2001D Rhode Island State Quarter value in 2026. The Ocean State, dirty coins, MS grades, errors and auction history. What if that dirty 2001D Rhode Island quarter sitting in an old coin jar looks worthless? But one tiny difference could make it much more interesting to collectors. Today we're examining the 2001D Rhode Island State Quarter, featuring the words, the Ocean State, and the date 1790. The year Rhode Island entered the Union. This is part of the United States 50-state quarters program, but don't make the mistake of thinking every 2001D Rhode Island quarter is rare. The real story is much more specific. A circulated coin is one story, a dirty coin is another, a superb mint state specimen is another, and a genuine mint error or recognized variety could create an entirely different collecting story. So let's examine this coin one example at a time and see what the 2026 numismatic market actually tells us. Imagine opening an old jar and finding a 2001D Rhode Island quarter. It's dark, the surfaces look dirty, there are scratches around the portrait, the reverse has lost some of its original brightness, and the first thought might be, this must be an old rare coin. Dirt and discoloration don't automatically increase value. In fact, a dirty appearance can simply indicate that the coin circulated or was exposed to its environment. The first thing to remember is that condition is more important than appearance alone. Don't polish it, don't scrub it, don't use chemicals to make it shine. If you think the coin may be collectible, preserve it in the condition you found it and investigate the underlying surfaces, because the next Rhode Island quarter could tell a completely different story. Now look at the reverse. You'll see the Rhode Island design and the inscription 1790 that isn't the date of the quarter. It's the year Rhode Island joined the Union. The coin also carries the phrase, the Ocean State. That nickname connects directly to Rhode Island's identity and its long maritime history. The state quarter program turned details like these into miniature history lessons. Millions of people encountered American history simply by receiving a quarter in their change. And that's one reason collectors continue to enjoy the series. The 2001D Rhode Island quarter isn't just a piece of metal. It represents one state's place in American history. Now let's focus on the small d mint mark. The D tells us the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. This is important because the Rhode Island State Quarter was produced in different mint issues. PCGS separately catalogs the 2001P Rhode Island and 2001D Rhode Island circulation strikes. But here's the key point. The D mint mark does not automatically make the coin rare. It is primarily an identification feature. So if you find a 2001D Rhode Island quarter, don't immediately assume you've discovered a valuable error. First identify the coin, then examine its condition, then investigate varieties, then compare actual sales. That process is much more reliable than simply searching for the largest number online. Now imagine another Rhode Island quarter. This one has been through everyday commerce. The rims show wear. Washington's portrait has contact marks. The reverse design isn't perfectly sharp. There's nothing spectacular about it. This is the kind of state quarter that was designed to circulate. For an ordinary circulated 2001D Rhode Island quarter, you shouldn't expect an enormous premium simply because it is from 2001. The state quarters were made in large quantities. The interesting value stories generally begin when the individual coin has something unusual about it. That could mean exceptional preservation. It could mean a recognized variety, or it could mean a genuine mint error. And that's where our fifth coin enters the story. Now we have a certified example. It's graded MS65, that means it is in the mint state range, rather than being a circulated coin. And we have an actual documented auction example. PCGS records a 2001D Rhode Island MS65 example that sold for $7 in a David Lawrence RC internet auction in October 2006. That number is useful because it demonstrates something important. Being mint state doesn't automatically mean a coin is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. Grade matters, but so does the exact grade. MS65 is one thing, MS66 is another, MS67 is another. And at the highest levels, the population of surviving examples can become much smaller, so never treat MS as a single value category. Now our next coin moves up one grade. This Rhode Island quarter is certified MS66 PCGS, records a 2001 Rhode Island MS-66 example that sold for $9 at Great Collections in September 2012. Only a small numerical difference separates MS-65 and MS-66, but that doesn't mean the market must move in a perfectly predictable way. Auction prices depend on the individual coin, certification, timing, buyer interest, and other circumstances. This is why experienced collectors don't simply multiply a price because the grade went up 1 point. Every sale needs to be considered on its own. And now we arrive at the most interesting documented Rhode Island auction record. Imagine a 2001 Rhode Island quarter that has survived in extraordinary condition. The surfaces are exceptionally clean. The design is sharply struck. The coin has the appearance collectors expect from a top-grade modern quarter. PCGS records an auction record of $199.75 for a PCGS MS-68 2001 Rhode Island quarter, sold by Heritage Auctions on December 27, 2016. Now that is a much more exciting number, but don't make the classic mistake. This does not mean every 2001 Rhode Island quarter is worth $199.75. It means a specific MS-68 example achieved that result. And that's the entire lesson of modern coin collecting. The date may be common, while the very high grade is much harder to achieve. Now let's bring everything into 2026. PCGS's current price guide lists the 2001 Rhode Island MS issue across a range of grades, with values rising as the grade increases. Its displayed guide values reach $165 at the high end shown for this issue. Its population report also shows certified examples across multiple MS grades, including examples at the very high end of the grading scale. That gives us an important picture of today's market. A normal dirty or circulated quarter isn't automatically a high-value coin. A certified high-grade example is a different market item, and a documented auction record is another important piece of evidence. So if somebody tells you every 2001 Rhode Island quarter is worth hundreds of dollars, that's simply not supported by the documented sales. Now let's address another common online claim. Suppose someone says, I have a Rhode Island quarter with no date. The first step is identification. The Rhode Island state quarter itself carries 2001 as its issue year, while 1790 represents Rhode Island's statehood date. If a date appears missing or unreadable, that doesn't automatically prove a rare mint error. It could be wear. It could be damage, it could be dirt, it could be a poor photograph, or the coin could be incorrectly identified, so don't turn a missing-looking number into a giant valuation claim without evidence. Now imagine a different Rhode Island quarter. The lettering appears doubled, the edge looks unusual, part of the design seems strangely struck. Now we have a legitimate reason to investigate, but remember, unusual does not automatically mean error. A scratch can look like doubling, a hit can distort lettering. A damaged rim can resemble a striking problem, and post-mint damage can occur long after the coin left the mint. A genuine error should be identified using established numismatic references, and for a potentially valuable piece, professional authentication can provide stronger evidence. That is how you separate a real numismatic discovery from an exaggerated internet claim. You may also see claims saying, only one of these coins ever sold. That sounds incredibly rare. But be careful with that wording. PCGS currently lists 54 auction lots for the 2001 Rhode Island MS category, with an auction record of $199.75. So there is documented auction history for the issue. An individual grade, variety, or certification combination might have limited appearances, but that is different from saying the entire 2001 Rhode Island quarter has sold only once. Always ask what exactly the one-time claim refers to. This may be the most important practical lesson in today's video. If your Rhode Island quarter is dirty, resist the temptation to make it shine. Collectors care about original surfaces. Cleaning can leave scratches, unnatural brightness, or other signs that affect collectability. So if your coin has an unusual feature, keep it as you found it. Photograph both sides. Photograph the mint mark. Examine the edge. Record the condition. Then compare it against reliable references. The coin doesn't need to look perfect to deserve investigation. Put 8 Rhode Island quarters next to each other. The first is dirty and circulated. The second is heavily worn. The third has a clearer strike. The fourth is an uncertified high-grade candidate. The fifth is MS65. The sixth is MS66. The seventh is an extraordinary MS68 example. The eighth has a suspected error that needs investigation. All eight carry the same basic design, but their stories are completely different. And that's why coin collecting is not simply about finding an old date. It's about finding the feature that separates one specimen from another. So, what is your 2001 D Rhode Island, the Ocean State quarter worth? If it's a normal dirty circulated example, don't assume that dirt or the D mint mark makes it rare. If it's a certified MS65, documented auction evidence includes a $7 sale. An MS66 example has a documented $9 sale. And an exceptional MS68 example reached $199.75 at Heritage Auctions in 2016. PCGS's current guide shows that the market continues to distinguish sharply between ordinary grades and exceptional preservation. So the real question, every 2001 D Rhode Island quarter valuable? The better question is, what makes my particular quarter different? Maybe it's extraordinary condition, maybe it's a recognized variety, maybe it's a genuine mint error, or maybe it's simply a wonderful piece of American history that carried the story of Rhode Island into everyday commerce. The 1790 inscription connects the coin to Rhode Island's entry into the Union. The Ocean State celebrates the state's identity. The D identifies Denver production, and the condition tells us how successfully that particular coin survived. So before you throw that dirty 2001 D Rhode Island quarter back into a jar, take one more look. Because the coin may be ordinary, but the right condition, the right grade, or the right unusual characteristic can make the story much more interesting. One state, one quarter, one D mint mark. But every individual coin has a different story. And in the 2026 numismatic market, that's exactly where the real value investigation begins. Thanks for cooperate, and please subscribe to my channel.